Hey guys, today I'm doing a video that was an answer to a question by a few different trans women who are doing a series of videos, or I guess a collection of videos, on the topic of when did you realize that transition was possible for you? And this is the answer to this is very different for different people, and a lot of it really does depend on age and access to the internet, or access to information in general about transsexualism or being transgendered. So for me, I'm lucky. I kind of always knew about transgender people or transsexual people. I remember the first time I ever heard of a transgender person was, I was probably like 8 or 9 maybe, and I was at an after-school program, and one of the kids we were hanging out with, I remember the song "I Would Do Anything for Love" was by Meatloaf, was popular, or it was being played or something. I guess it was popular earlier than that, but it was being played, and I remember this kid who was around my age, 8 or 9, saying, "Yeah, I would do anything for love except get a sex change." And like, I remember the exact place where he said it. I remember it's like a very vivid memory for me, because I know for a fact it was the first time I had heard that word. And so I asked him, what does that mean? What is a sex change? And he said it meant when a man turned into a woman. Um, and that always stuck with me. So I guess that was maybe the first point I realized that maybe somewhere in the world it was possible that people did this sort of thing. Um, but it wasn't until I got access to the internet at home, and in a way that I guess I could be private with it, so it wasn't with parental supervision, or it wasn't in a room with everybody. When I first got access to the internet unsupervised was when I took, I think, my very first search back in, back on like Alta Vista, or one of those ancient pre-Google search engines, was I want to be a girl, or something like that. And if you did a search for that, even back then, you would come up with, websites by transsexuals or people who felt they wanted to be the opposite gender. So I think that was probably when I first learned the word transgender or transsexual. I was probably maybe 12 or 13 at the time. So I was lucky enough to get access to the internet early, and I remember what the internet was like back then, and I would read the blogs, I guess primitive blogs, by transsexuals, and there were even some by young transitioners back then, believe it or not. I remember a few of them. There's one or two that are still around. Maybe I'll try and find them. But anyway, so I remember reading about them, and about them deciding to transition. But at the time, when I was a teenager, it never clicked with me. It always seemed like this outrageous, crazy thing that these people that were my age or maybe a little bit older had decided to do. But it wasn't because I didn't want it for myself. I did. I really, really wanted it. But it wasn't something that seemed even remotely possible for me or my life. I couldn't imagine myself doing such a thing. It seemed so beyond what would be required to be brave that I just couldn't. It didn't click as something that would even really be a potentially possible thing for me. Although I guess intellectually I knew that, yes, this is possible for a person to do. It's even possible for a young person to do. So that sort of continued, and I spent from my earliest time as a teenager, after finding out about it, through when I actually did decide to transition, reading about transsexuals, reading about transgender people and trans-related issues, reading about transitioning, what was involved with it, what hormones did. I was pretty much an expert within the first year or two. I read everything that I could. It was obsessive almost, the amount that I really learned about it in the beginning, and then continued to learn about it over the years. So when did I decide that transition was possible for me is really kind of the better question, I think, since I'd really, for most of my adolescent and adulthood, known that transition was possible. When did I know that it was possible for me? Well, I think that took a lot of experience, and it took a lot of me doing a lot of testing of myself and figuring out what wouldn't work in my life through a lot of failed experiences, failed relationships, failures to be happy as a guy. I think I really started to realize that transition was possible for me when I realized that I couldn't go the rest of my life being a guy and be happy. I had everything in my life that I thought was supposed to make me happy. I had, relationship, a successful business, enough money, friends who all saw me as a guy. Like, my life from the outside seemed really pretty great, but I wasn't happy and I didn't feel authentic. I just felt like a phony who had done a really good job faking it. And that's when I started to think that transition might be possible for me, that really, if I wanted to be happy and live authentically, there wasn't any other way to go. This would really be the only option. That's when I started to think that maybe I had to, maybe not just that it was possible for me, but maybe I really had to do this. And then some other things helped with that, and I've discussed this in other videos, so I don't want to, rehash it too much, but definitely realizing that there were other people my age who had transitioned successfully was huge. Realizing that this was a lifelong thing and it wasn't going to go away. And then realizing that I was spending a huge amount of time thinking about it. I was spending, when I counted it up, I was spending 40 hours a week or more thinking about, watching, looking at trans-related videos or narratives or stories or whatever. It was taking up a huge amount of my life, and it started to seem ridiculous. I wanted to start building more than that in my life, and I knew that as a guy, I couldn't do it. It just wasn't going to work. So that's kind of when I began trying to figure it out, talking to a therapist and taking those baby steps forward. That's really about it, guys. That's when I realized transition was possible for me. Thanks. Bye.